It's been a busy week in Barcelona world already, and I already have taken time to talk about the big headline of the week concerning Fermin Lopez, even talked about the medium-sized headline concerning Villarreal's Carl Etta Eyong. So check those out if you haven't already. Welcome to episode 718 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and I please implore you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, give me a good rating on the podcast apps, or become a Patreon, because even with that other big news of the week so far with Fermin and Etta Eyong, I still had enough and maybe even more for a top five. I'm not going to waste any of your time because the news is a lot this week, so let's dive right in. For our first headline, and because I do need a break from talking about Barcelona's FFP situation, player registrations, but hey, there is positive. Gerard Martin is officially registered, and he's got a new number. But with all the other player registrations and money talk every single day, let's start talking about the Champions League draw. I was skeptical of it last season, and I wouldn't say it entirely won me over. I think if you're just looking at your team, it can be interesting to play the 8 teams that you do, but there is definitely an imbalance to the way that those pots are. But I guess those would be the same case when the teams were built in the groups and the pools that they were. So I guess nothing has really changed that much. You still get the kind of competition that you would have faced in the group stage, and the league phase does allow each team to play different teams. And whether it's home or away, if you want to win the Champions League, you got to take care of business wherever you've got to play. So that's kind of my philosophy on it. Just win your home games for sure. Win a bunch of away games. You're in the league phase. You're fine. And then you move on to the knockouts. Either way, whether it was in a group of 4 or whether it's in this league phase where you face 8 different opponents. So with last year's league phase, I think being a little bit of fun, this year's league phase looks just as bit of fun. The home games are PSG, Eintracht Frankfurt, Olympiacos, and Copenhagen. Then it's away to Stamford Bridge for a date with Chelsea, to Belgium to beat Club Brugge, a rematch from 2019 to Slavia Prague, and a trip to St. James Park to meet Newcastle. There is some intriguing storylines for a ton of these matchups, highlighted, of course, by the meeting with defending Champions League winners in Luis Enrique's PSG, a return that Lucho has already said is home for him. He's not necessarily thrilled to play Barcelona, but that makes the tie even more fun. And then the Club World Cup champions, Chelsea, and I've already been seeing a ton of talk from the 2009 matchup between the two that did kind of propel Barcelona to winning the Champions League and starting the Pep Guardiola and Messi era. So hopefully we are in for, at least on the Barcelona side, less fireworks, but hey, if the result is the same, I'm totally for it. But around the edges, there is some fun stuff, whether it's Rooney Bargi, hopefully he's registered, facing off against his old team in Copenhagen, or, of course, going on the road to St. James Park to Newcastle. I think that is a fun tie for Barcelona to take part in as well. So while this fixture list doesn't necessarily strike fear in my heart, there may be some hiccups, there may be some challenges, just like last season with Monaco to start things off. Hopefully Barcelona can avoid an early red card like they did last season, but they did sort it all out, and I expect them to do the same this time around. Again, it's a fixture list that doesn't necessarily scare me, but it will be challenging, and Barcelona can't take any of their opponents lightly. And I think a reasonable expectation for FC Barcelona with this league phase, I think it was regardless of who they played, but especially with this group, is definitely to make the top 8 and potentially even the top 4. All right, that fun little break where we got to talk about the season ahead is over because we're back to talking about the transfers. First up this week was Iñaki Peña, who is on his way to Elche. We've known for weeks now that he'd be leaving, but he did sign a contract extension until 2029 and was immediately loaned out to newly promoted Elche for the season. Why the contract extension, you may ask? Well, reports are that Elche wouldn't have been able to register Peña if he had spread out his salary, hence the contract extension. This also gives Barcelona the ability to sell him to a first division side next summer in case Elche go down. It was said that Cesc Fabregas and Como pushed hard for him, but the player ultimately wanted to go back to Alicante, where both he and his partner are from, which makes a ton of sense to me. If you're happy at home, even if things are unbalanced at the club scene, then at least life can be okay. Plus, Elche is managed by Etta Sarabia, who Peña worked with both in his days at Villarreal's academy, and then again when Sarabia was assisting Quique Setién at Barcelona. I doubt there is a parent club clause in that loan contract, and I do expect him to win the first gloves job at Elche, so I would expect that Barcelona will be seeing Iñaki Peña at least once this season. Another player that Barcelona might have to face this season is the new Mallorca player in John Virgili, who made the move from Barça Athletic and is headed to the Balearic Islands. The 19-year-old was sold to Mallorca and promptly signed a new 5-year deal. The deal is reportedly a €3.5 million fee for 50% of the player's rights, with Barcelona also receiving half of a future sale, which is different than a buyback option. There is no buyback option, but with 50% of the player's rights, Barcelona would then have to buy him from Mallorca and buy 100% of the rights if they were to get him back either as a player or to sell him on and keep the entirety of that fee. If Mallorca were to sell him on, again, it's 50% of the future sale. On the surface, I think that's still a pretty good deal for a player that just joined La Masia last summer. Virgili didn't come as a big prospect. He had been at Gimnàstic and Granollers, Europa, Mataró, Espanyol, Dam, you name it. He bounced around a lot in his youth, and scouts in Catalonia definitely had the chance to see him and try to bring him into La Masia. But finally, at 18, he joined Barcelona and was better than what most would have expected based on his youth career up to that point. He instantly looked comfortable on either flank with the U19s, that's Juvenil A, helping them to win the treble, and then also looked very much like he fit in with Barca Athletic too. At that point, people were calling for him to get called up to the first team, and then him getting called up to the first team preseason, but then just missing out on the trip. That's the perfect explanation as to why he's heading to Mallorca. He was clearly better than the 4th division in Spain, but Hansi Flick didn't think he was ready to help the first team now, especially with Marcus Rashford coming in. Daniel Rodriguez is older and also finds himself in the same boat. He is likely gone this summer too. And I know the next question you're going to ask is why the fee and not just a loan? Well, first team registrations, my dear Watson. Barca can always buy out the other 50% of his rights from Mallorca to get him back if he continues to impress. And that fee, in theory, wouldn't be that much more than 3.5 mil, maybe 5 or 6. At that point, if Barca wants him for the first team, then that's probably going to be a bargain for a first team player at 5 or 6 mil. And I think Barcelona is also expecting, even if they don't want him back, that sell-on fee of 50% is going to help them out in the future, because I do doubt that he sticks around Mallorca for very long if he is that good. But you know what? Mallorca is a side that is expecting to stay up in the Liga and even push towards those European spots. So if being at Mallorca is just his level and ultimately that's where he settles in, that's just fine for a career in Spain. So John Virgili, hope he comes back to Barcelona someday, but I think this is actually an okay deal for Barca. From the middle of the Liga table to, well, the middle of the Liga table, at least that's what expectations are, or Romeu's time at Barcelona for the second time is over due to a contract termination. The soon-to-be 34-year-old will become a free agent and likely return to Girona, who have started the Liga season quite poorly and can definitely use all the help they can get. I don't have much to say about Romeu and his time at Barca that hasn't already been said by many on the internet. I did think there was a world where it would really work out for him. And while he did play 37 games in the 2023-24 season, Champions League and the top-level games, that proved to be just too high a pace for him. I could also say that it wasn't his pace at this point in his career, but I also wonder if it was ever really the pace and level that he was at. Instead of criticizing Romeu, I'll say just like John Virgili, if Mallorca, if Girona, if that's his level, that's totally fine to have a long and fruitful career, which he already has. Starting every week for teams in top divisions in England. Remember, Romeu was at Southampton for the longest time. And Spain, that is a pretty good career. And if you look at Romeu's career trajectory, he was at Chelsea, Barcelona, Valencia, and Stuttgart. Those are all on his resume. So yeah, there's no shade here for Romeu. I'm glad he got his, I guess we'll call it his dream move to Barcelona. Helped out a little bit, but ultimately was not going to be of any help to Hansi Flick this season and is much better used. Again, not even with the transfer fee, because at his age, nobody was coming for him and nobody could register him around Spain either. So just contract termination and get that off the wage bill and maybe register somebody else, which they already did with Gerard Martin. Lastly, I've got 2 warnings concerning this weekend. The first is that if you're not a member on Big Up, that's a free membership to hang out with me in the chat, then you will likely miss my watch along on Big Up this weekend on Sunday. So please join me for that. Again, become a Big Up member for free. And then the other warning is that the pitch this weekend against Rayo Vallecano, well, it could be pretty nasty for Barcelona and actually for Rayo Vallecano too. International break awaits, but Rayo Vallecano is not preparing for the break with the most pristine field conditions ahead of the Liga matchup on Sunday. The images from El Chiringuito, who I usually just roll my eyes at, those are concerning, to say the least. I feel like usually I just say, yeah, it's a bummer, but both teams have to play on a bad field, and the ball moving slower is just an advantage that the home team gets. But this field in particular cannot be acceptable. And it's been funny watching Rayo Vallecano in the last few days come out and say, yeah, we don't love the pitch either. That's not acceptable to us. Players already play way too many games, and playing on that surface, somebody's probably going to get hurt. And believe it or not, this is actually the week that Barcelona players get the additional rest over their opposition, as Rayo played a Europa Conference League match yesterday. They stomped Neman Grodno from Belarus 4-0 with all 4 goals coming after the 64th minute, which does mean that some of the regulars were called upon to put the tie away in the second half instead of getting the day off. So even a 4-0 result didn't necessarily give Rayo Vallecano the rest and rotation I think they would have wanted. Maybe that gives Barcelona a slight advantage on Sunday even on the road in Madrid. But we do know that Rayo Vallecano is always a challenging opponent. Again, I remind you, join me for that watch along on Big Up on Sunday afternoon. And in the meantime, subscribe on YouTube, give a good rating on the podcast apps, become a member for Patreon for as low as $3 to help me continue to make shows like this and get these shows ad-free. And as always, until next time, Forza Barca.